Today's video is a PowerPoint on PowerPoints and creating PowerPoints that don't hurt people. So, why create a PowerPoint about PowerPoints? One is because a good PowerPoint can really enhance a presentation, make it better, give you something, give your audience something to look at, and give them reminders of your main points as you're going along. And it gives the audience something to look at and gives you something to look at besides just each other. But also because a bad PowerPoint presentation is incredibly distracting, and people have become so used to them that bad PowerPoints actually have become sort of a groan, right? You're like, oh, another PowerPoint. So knowing how to do them well is really important. So why would we talk about the rules? I sort of look at the rules of PowerPoint the same way I look at the rules of grammar. You need to know them so that you can follow them when you must and break them when you want to. They're conventions. They're not really rules. You're not going to get thrown in jail for breaking any of these rules any more than you will get thrown in jail for a comma splice. But you need to know what they are in order to break them on purpose. So while a sentence fragment is fine if you do it intentionally for style, a PowerPoint slide that you break the rules in is also acceptable as long as it's done to create effect. So for this, you really, like all things that are rhetorical, you need to know your audience. And if your audience will be accepting of something that is a little less than conventional, then go ahead and break the rules. But if your audience is going to expect a really conventional PowerPoint slide, then that's exactly what you should give them. So this is key. Okay, so here's rule set number 1. Do not copy and paste entire paragraphs into your slideshow. A PowerPoint presentation is not meant to be read. You might as well just hand out your paper or whatever it is. You do not ever copy and paste whole paragraphs. However, there is an exception, and that is if you have a particular quote that you think is really important for your audience to see and hear the entire thing. Sometimes you may want to include an entire quote. You never want more than 3 or 4 of these little bullet points, and they should be bullet points. Not even complete sentences are needed. Just little bullet points that remind your reader of what your points are for that particular slide, and then make your bullet points short and descriptive, but short, as these are. Rule set number 2, make sure each slide has a heading. You don't ever want a slide without a heading. You want to remind your readers what the main point is of that particular slide. They won't remember from one slide to the next. Even if your slide is just a continued, right? Then you have a continued, but you always want a header. You always want to make sure you use a nice, large, readable font like this one. I believe this is 14 point. This is also a non-serif font. So a serif font, this is a non-serif that looks like this. A serif font looks like this. You want to avoid those. They're more difficult to read. So you want something that is really easy to read and clear. This is not the time for foofy fonts. All right, rule set number 3. You want an overall design scheme. You'll notice that I use this background for each one, and I have these little heads that I've put in the corners, right, with scary faces, but they give your slideshow a consistency. You don't want different colors, different slides, different themes for every page. You want one, just one slideshow theme, and you want to really avoid these. If they're really gaudy and distracting and garish, then they take away from you and draw people to your slideshow. And you want to make sure that what you are talking about and what your slideshow looks like, that they complement one another. Okay, so these are all scary faces, and I'm talking about slideshows that scare people. So thus the scary face. Plus this is also English class, so I have all these letters around here, right? So you want to make sure things go together. Rule set number 4. Make sure you proofread. While an error in a paper can be quickly overlooked because you have hundreds and hundreds of words, in your slideshow you'll have very few. If you have a spelling error, if you have a grammar error, if you have a punctuation error, I guarantee you your audience will notice it. And frankly, so will you. The minute you go to do your presentation, you'll be so obsessed with the fact that you spelled something wrong that you'll get distracted by your own PowerPoint. So make sure that there are zero errors, no typos. Okay, and number 5, make sure you test it. Whatever computer you did it on, make sure you test it on a different one. If you did it on a Mac, test it on a PC. If you did it on a PC, test it on a Mac. If you did it on an old software, test it on new software, because sometimes things just go wonky. Okay, so slideshows that hurt people. What's not to do and why? Are you ready? Here we go. This is a big no-no. There, you might as well just put a piece of paper up there with some words on it. It's boring. There's no point in this. This one has too much stuff. There's how many bullets? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 bullets. You got junk all over. And then we've got this weird piece of toast that I've never really quite figured out why is there. It has nothing to do with glassed programs. And then this obviously is so difficult to read that there's no way anyone could ever get anything out of it. The only time this would be acceptable is if all you wanted them to see was the organizational chart, and then it might be okay. And this one, while what you may be looking at on your computer screen may look okay, when you put this up in front of the class, that is not going to show up. Those red numbers on the blue background, they will not show up. You need contrast. So just like my red pen doesn't even show up well, you need contrast. So make sure your colors and your backgrounds have a lot of contrast. And this is another issue of contrast, right? While the purple shows up well here, then the blue does not show up well here. It only shows up well out here in this area, but not here because of the background. So these backgrounds with gradients, they call that a gradient, probably a bad idea. And you want to make sure that what you're looking at, while you might think, oh, that's really pretty, it might to your audience look like pouring a beer or maybe vomit. You want to be careful what this might look like to your audience. And you don't want to be too kitschy or too cute. This is a bad idea because while it might be to you, you might be thinking, oh, that's really on target, right? That might be why you thought it was a great idea. The fact is, someone might be thinking about the bar instead. And this is a really bad color for presentations. It's kind of a pretty green. When you look at it up here, it looks pretty, but when you look at it on the white background, it ends up with a sort of vomit-like color. So be careful of your colors. And this one, you know, is a good idea, but what happens is your whole audience will tip their heads in order to read your words. So even though it's kind of cool, you want to avoid anything that makes your audience need to tip their heads. You also want to avoid clip art. Clip art has kind of, you know, gone the way of Donkey Kong. It's a little bit cheesy these days. So avoid clip art. There are beautiful images out there. You can just do Google Images to find your pictures, or you can also go to Flickr, which is a really good website that has also beautiful pictures. And then you want to avoid faces. Faces on slideshows are really creepy, especially ones with eyeballs, because it gives the audience the feeling that they're being looked at. So avoid anything with faces and eyeballs. And also avoid anything that's cheesy. You might think, oh, this is really sweet or pretty, but to your audience, it's just cheesy. Unless you're going to propose to someone in class while you're doing a presentation. Well, I guess that would be pretty cool. Anyway, you also want to avoid, you want to think about your audience and the age group that you're trying to appeal to. This is fine if you're doing a presentation for second grade, but it's not fine if you're doing it for something older. So pay attention to the audience and what would appeal to them. And this is one of those things that's it's kind of cool looking, but there's way too much going on. This is very distracting background. And I just had to throw this in here because there's an actual potato background for template for presentations. They actually exist. Okay, and then you also want to think about motion, that your presentation is allowed to do. And while some of these you might think, oh, that's really cool, I guarantee you while you're talking, you have to wait for the text to come in and come flying in, and it's really unappealing. And it really is not cool. It might seem cool while you're creating the presentation, but when you go up to present, keep in mind that that takes a second or two to come onto the screen, and you have to stand there and wait. So too much motion is a bad idea. If you're going to do it, pick one motion alone and use it consistently and only on purpose. So some lesson learned. Templates are just templates. They're starting points. You can take a template like this background that I have and add your own images to create something that fits what you're doing. So make sure that what you have chosen to do and the images that you add actually complement your presentation. They go with the content of what you're discussing. Pictures are great as long as they fit. Also, make sure that you think of these as a visual way to enhance what you're talking about. Use your images, add images, and use them on purpose. And they can be a really powerful way to make your presentation more effective, but only if you do it well. So think carefully. All right, so while you're presenting, you have 10 minutes for your presentation. Plan your time carefully. Practice, make sure you go over it. If you're presenting by yourself, 10 minutes. If you're presenting in a group, 10 minutes. You want to stick to that 10 minutes. We only have 2 days to do the entire class. There are 25 of you, so we've got to stick to that 10-minute rule. Make sure you load your presentation onto a thumb drive and online somewhere. Maybe email it to yourself. Have it all prepped to go before class. And if you have a Mac, if you use the drag images feature where you can just click on an image and drag it into your PowerPoint, guess what? When you get up to present, they won't be there. All your images will be gone. So make sure that you do the insert function. You have to actually insert or copy and paste it in. You cannot drag it in. I don't know why, but on a Mac, you just can't do that. So what's covering your presentation? You want to tell them what your topic is, sort of like the introduction in your paper. So whatever your intro would be about, this is what your you want to make sure that you cover. So that's the first thing. And then you also want to talk about the main points of discussion. Whatever you found in your research, make sure you hit those. So when you did your outline, you want to make sure you hit all those main bullets of your outline. Try and find at least one powerful quote for each point of your outline. So something from each source that you use. And then at the end, I'd like you to leave a couple of minutes for discussion. So maybe 8 minutes of presentation and 2 minutes for discussion. So think about what questions you'd like to have your audience talk about. And what not to do in your presentation. Please do not come to class unprepared. Don't open up your presentation and have it not work. Don't come to class and not have practiced or know who's going to say what. Make sure you spend the time preparing for this presentation. Also, do not be rude to other presenters. While I am used to people coming to class and talking and being on their phones while I'm talking, I'm the teacher and I'm used to it, and frankly, it doesn't bother me. But it's very different when it's your peers. When your peers are up there, they're probably nervous. They probably want to know that what they're doing is working well. And if you are on your phone or you are on your computer and you're not paying attention, I will mark you absent if you are rude. Period. I will not give you credit for being there that day. Also, make sure you don't have one person do all the talking, unless, of course, you are presenting by yourself. But if you are in a group, everyone has to participate and do some talking. Nobody gets to sit back and just let everybody else do the work. And last but not least, never, ever just read off of your slides. Ever. And that